Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Two Dope Black Doulas. Today's episode, we have a special guest, my doula sister, Jamila Jackson Kelly. Jamila is a licensed clinical mental health counselor and supervisor and a substance use counselor. She is the owner of Grounded and Growing Wellness, LLC. So, Jamila, I invite you to introduce yourself as well.
I mean, you really covered the bases, right? The only other thing I'll add is that I do still see clients through Urban Healing Counseling, PLLC, which I'm the executive director of. And so that's a group private practice in the area that focuses on brown and black folks. So yeah, I enjoy seeing clients through there as well.
Awesome. So today we're going to talk about the intersection of mental health and physical health. So Jamila is a guru on nutrition and that comes from a backstory that I hope she would share today about her own personal journey with her healing and everything, and how that everything between nutrition and your physical health and your mental health are all interconnected. So yeah, if you don't mind, could you talk a little bit about your journey?
Sure, gladly. So if we go back maybe about 4 years, and the height of the pandemic, right, September 2020, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And so a little bit of backstory, my mother has had severe rheumatoid arthritis since before I was born. So it's something I've seen up close. I've seen her journey. I've seen the medications. I've seen, just all the things. I remember being very little and people kind of staring at her, like in her hands, like she was a monster. Like I remember being very enraged when I was a small child, just because of how it presented on her. I also was like starting the car for her when I was 5 years old, like in kindergarten, because she couldn't maneuver things. So I'm very familiar with what that looks like. So when I got this diagnosis, I was really, I don't know, I can't say I wasn't caught off guard because I felt like it somewhere was going to be in my future, but I still was not prepared. And I just didn't want it, right? Like part of me wanted to put my head in the sand, and I was like, oh, like is this really my fate? And so when I look back, it was really, I think, kind of a perfect storm of things between the pandemic and all the extra stress that was going on. I was working a very stressful job, even though I was working from home and I was fortunate to have benefits and all the things. It was still a lot of stress. And then we were trying to move and find a new house, right? Because the housing market was looking great and everyone was at home and stuck in the house. Like, we're like, oh, let's go find another house. So a lot of stress, then the hereditary factors. And in the end, this is kind of what it manifested as. I noticed it kind of in my finger and one of my joints. And it was just this nagging feeling like I needed to pop my knuckle, but it wouldn't pop. And I was already doing physical therapy for a knee thing. And I asked the people kind of like, you think this might be arthritis? Like, I don't know, like I have this family history. And so they're like, oh, you should see somebody. So I kind of scheduled myself actually with the rheumatologist. And I remember the doctor, the nurse actually called to screen me. And she was like, how'd you get an appointment? I was like, oh, I referred myself. And she was like, that's not how this works. So she gave me like 30 seconds to like explain my story of why I should be seen by the rheumatologist. So I did a pretty good job because I got to keep my appointment. But right away, they put me on all sorts of medications that were really serious and had side effects. I think I started with Plaquenil, which is also called hydroxychloroquine. And back at this time, Trump was telling people that that this was a way to prevent COVID.
Right.
And so I actually had a hard time
finding it. Yep.
Right. And so I was like, thanks a lot. For people who actually needed it like me, it took me a couple extra weeks just to get pre-authorization and for them to really verify with doctors like, oh, she really needs it. Yeah. So that was the first medicine they put me on. And that actually has a side effect where it can build up in the behind your eyes. And so I had to start going to an eye specialist like every 6 months to like have this special test done where you put your face in a globe and like look at things, because the deposits can be really damaging to your eyes and they have to watch that. So I was like, geez, like that's something I didn't anticipate. And so I was on that for a while. The symptoms weren't really getting that much better. And because I think stress was increasing, I was noticing like light sensitivity that was really scary. Like, so, I mean, the summer of 2021 was not fun for me. I remember being fully clothed everywhere I went, and we're still looking at houses. I'm going to house showings. I got like umbrellas to shield myself because when the sun hit my skin, it actually like kind of burned and it would cause rashes and it was painful. And I hated that. And so that was kind of a sad summer for me, because here in North Carolina, of course, we have bright sunshine right out there, like hot girl summer, but it was not such for me that summer. And so then they ended up putting me on another medicine, methotrexate, that is actually an old school chemo drug. And I was familiar with this one because my mother was on it for like 2 decades. And I remember she'd
Mm,
take it once a week on Sunday with dinner. It was a whole bunch of little pills, and it just felt intimidating. Like I'd have to take like 8 at a time. And I was like, why
mm,
can't this just be one big pill? But they're like these tiny pills, and I have to like double count and count again. And then I would take them all. And that medicine affects your kidney and liver. And so I would have to get those checked every 6 months with blood work, and then I have to see the doctor again. So it was like adding appointments, adding all these extra things. I had to be really careful about like alcohol consumptions. Really, at this time, I had to stop drinking because I was like, I can't time it with when I'm supposed to take the medicine.
mm,
I was
mm.
trying to be like really careful, and it just wasn't worth it in the end. So that was one of the first things to go, was kind of drinking alcohol. And I wasn't drinking a lot, but just, my glass of
Yeah,
wine or whatever,
yeah.
all that went away. And so I was on methotrexate. And then over time, it was like, oh, you're still not progressing like we want. You're still having these symptoms. At one point, they were talking about me having lupus possibly, which was super scary. I know you're familiar, and I was just like, what now? Like, what is
Yeah.
it? One, is it both? Like, which is it? But my hair was falling out. I actually ended up cutting my hair pretty short because it wasn't a whole lot left, and it looked really
Mm,
sad. So I'm
mm.
happy to say that it's grown back now, but this was pre what it looked like, but it was short, it was stringy, it was just not much going on. So yeah, it really affected my life in a lot of ways. And so around this time, I was just kind of thinking, like, what else is there? Like, there's got to be a better way. Like, I've got two boys. I'm a boy mom. Right now, they're about to be 7 and 16, but back then they were like, I don't know, 13 and 5 or so. And I couldn't imagine myself being on medicines, like really
Mm,
serious medicines like this for the rest of my life. And then they introduced another medicine. So they took me off the Plaquenil. Then I started Humira, which is actually an immunosuppressant, and
mhm,
it's an injectable. And so not only am I immunocompromised because of rheumatoid arthritis as a autoimmune disease, but I'm also like purposefully being immunocompromised by the medicine, because that's one way to treat autoimmune diseases, is to kind of like hamper your immune system a bit, right? So that it's not overreacting to itself.
yeah.
And so I started these injections, and that wasn't fun, right? Like, I mean, I figured like the injection part wasn't the worst of it. It was really kind of like all the build up to it. I had to do it once, I believe, every other week. And they have videos, and there's an app to help you out. There's all this support around it. But, when you have a misfire, the medicine goes down your stomach, and like your skin starts to react, and you have big welts. Like, that's stuff they
Mm,
don't really prepare you for. And
yeah.
so I just remember having a lot of those kind of situations and being like, okay, there's got to be something better. So along the way, I would make my questions for my doctors, and a lot of it would center around like, what should I be eating? Like, I hear about nightshade vegetables. I hear about this, like, what's going to trigger, what's going to trigger my symptoms, because I want to eliminate those things. So it kind of just started with a deep dive with that. I was kind of connected with certain people for different reasons, and I ended up having conversations with folks about really anti-inflammatory diets.
Mm,
And I was probably around this time, maybe 6 months before I was diagnosed with RA, I was told I was lactose intolerant. And so that was sad. I'm still grieving cheese to this day, like 4 years later. Like, I miss my good cheese. But I was kind of told by my gastroenterologist through a telehealth visit. She was like, yeah, your symptoms sounds like you're probably lactose intolerant, which isn't uncommon for people of color, especially as we get older. And so, it was like, all right. So as I'm learning about anti-inflammatory diets, I'm learning that dairy is really inflammatory. So it's kind of like, okay,
mm,
good riddance. Like, there's a reason why I shouldn't be taking that in. But then just looking at other kinds of meats and animal products, and I've never really eaten pork. I was born into a Muslim family, so pork was never in my diet really. But I like me a good steak. I liked my good red meat. And then chicken was all right. I love seafood. So I was kind of like, how am I going to balance this? Like, what's this going to look like? And the more and more I talked with folks and kind of ranked the inflammatory foods, like beef was up there. Like, it
mm,
was like number one.
mhm,
Lamb is up there too, which I enjoyed on occasion. But like, your poultries and your seafoods were kind of low. But
mhm,
I was trying things. I was even like eating seafood with like the shell on, like the like shrimp. I actually would try shrimp with the shell on because I heard it had glucosamine chondroitin in it. And so I was like, well, that can help my joint. So it give your jaw a workout, because it was the crunchiness, like after a whole meal of shrimp with the shells on, I was like, my jaw is tired. But I was trying all sorts of things. And so in the end, I found this program it was called Paddison Program. I think now he calls it Rheumatoid Solutions. But basically, it's like, it starts out with just like a fresh start. It's just a whole like elimination diet. And I found him and his program, and his story was interesting. He's an Australian researcher, and he was having really bad RA in the knees, really inflamed, and he was eating some cherries or something, and it made him sick. And when he realized his stomach, his system was empty, he realized he felt really good. So he was like, there's some kind of gut, connection here. So then he started slowly reintroducing things over years to figure out what gave him triggers and what didn't. And really from that is what he started this program. And so I started that. It was a huge, kind of life-changing thing. Even though I had already been, dabbling here and there, this was a full-on commitment. So I remember it was like after Mother's Day of that year, probably Mother's Day of 22, because we had like a fancy Mother's Day brunch at like the clubhouse where I live, and that was kind of like my last supper. Like that was the last time I ate all the conventional foods, because that weekend, the following weekend, was when I just went cold turkey with it all. So the first 3 days were raw, lots of leafy green vegetables, and the idea is that he's linking it to leaky gut syndrome. And so the idea is that leaky gut syndrome, there's certain things like permeating the bowel, and those things are like kind of leading to your joints, and it's causing the inflammatory symptoms and all of that. And so I just went all in. So with the leafy greens, you're healing the gut, you're healing the colon, so that eventually things won't permeate it, and then you can kind of resume what you want to eat, whatever level. But I have stayed vegan for the past 2 years. I was gluten-free very strictly in the beginning. I do eat gluten. I have to be choosy about my gluten. So if it's really worth it, I will eat it. If it's not worth it, I'm not trying to have a bunch of gluten in one day. So if I had pasta, one setting, I'm not going to have bread later. But I really just very mindful. So in all, I'm really just doing very mindful eating. I'm still vegan, and just focusing on, getting the things that my body needs, because I had to look at medicine as food is my medicine, because I didn't want to be on those medicines anymore. So I am happy to report that I was able to get off the Humira. I haven't been on it since June of 2023. So when my doctor saw me, he was kind of like, oh, there's no evidence of inflammatory markers in your blood work. There's no, like your bones, your joints look good in the x-rays. So he was like, I think we can maybe take you off the Humira. And I was like, maybe. I was like, this was my goal. Like I told you this a year ago. And he was like, oh, slow down. I was like, oh no, you're telling me once, you don't have to say it again. I'm ready to get off. So I was like, where can I give these extra pins to? I had 2 in my refrigerator. I was like, I'm ready to donate to somebody else. So I took them to his office, and I haven't been back. So I'm very happy to report I've been able to get off all the medicines. I have not been taking any kind of immunosuppressants, any kind of rheumatological drugs in over a year and a half.
Yeah, and I remember when we first connected and we met, and I was drawn to you and your story because like you said in the beginning, I too have lupus. So I experience a lot of those like joint pain and that sort of thing. And I'm also on Plaquenil or hydroxychloroquine as well. I did not have any issues during the pandemic, thank goodness, finding my medication. But I do remember him saying, like, president at the time saying, yeah, if you take that, it'll cure COVID, and people rushing out, and there were reports that, there were low supply on Plaquenil. And I'm like you said, like I take this medicine on a daily basis. Like, why would you do that? But, I remember, hearing you talk about how, you were able to like kind of reverse your symptoms with using food as your medicine. And I, I'm on my own journey because I too like a little steak and a little lamb. So I'm still trying to figure out what works best for me. But in my journey of discovering I had lupus, my symptoms didn't start until after I had my son in 2013. That's when I noticed like I was having joint pain from picking him up, and I was like, why is my hand and my wrist hurting? Like, that's not normal. Like, and I have a family history of lupus. So, my mom, having conversation with my mom, she was like, you might want to go to the doctor, go see a rheumatologist because, it might be related to lupus or whatever. And I've been on Plaquenil since then. Like you said, I have to go to see the certain doctor or eye specialist to have those tests done to make sure that the Plaquenil isn't building up or whatever. But I remember after meeting you and hearing how you were able to turn things around, I was like, oh, I need to get like her. I need to do those things. And for a little bit there, I was like very strict on intake or whatever. But it's interesting how we don't think in our culture, in our society, especially in the African American community, we don't connect the two about how our physical health plays a major role in our how we show up mentally, right? A lot of our what we're taught is that everything is centered around food in our culture, right? So you have a birthday, we're gonna eat something, we're going out to eat, or we're gonna cook something, right? Or it's a celebration, it's a holiday, we're gonna cook. Thanksgiving, we're cooking. So
Right. What dish are you bringing? Who's bringing the mac and cheese? Like I
right.
ain't coming. So and so's bringing the potato salad, right? We.
Oh, right. And we got to make sure a specific person is bringing the specific dish that
That's
we
right.
are
Those
accustomed
assignments are
to eating.
serious.
But it's interesting too that you mentioned about being lactose intolerant. Like a lot of Black people, African American people are lactose intolerant, and some of us suffer through. Like we're just we want our mac and cheese, you know, with the regular cheese, so we suffer through. And then some of us are like, we need to do something different because of our symptoms or whatever. But I am really big and wanting to talk about and bring awareness about how all of our mental health, our physical health, and everything is connected. And if we're feeling better in one area, like in our physical health, if we feel better in that, then our mental health is going to, you know, coincide and it'll be the same way. Like we'll feel better that way too. So I was really,
Absolutely.
really drawn to you when we had that conversation.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, even though I was trying to treat like rheumatoid, symptoms and very specific things, I just wanted my hands to feel good. I didn't want to trip getting out of bed in the middle of the night, go in the bathroom because my feet weren't ready. But I noticed other symptoms and systems in my body were doing better. Like even with my menstrual cycle, for instance, I remember when I was like raw vegan, I was early in the diet. I forgot I even was on my period because it was like no cramps, like no discomfort. It was just amazing, and I was like, it made my body work so much more efficiently in other ways. Like it felt like, okay, this is how we're supposed to work. And the things you've been clogging it up with are backfiring. And, so yeah, I really had a newfound appreciation for all the benefits of that, including mental. Like, I mean, I was happier, even though it was a lot of mental strain to like, this be disciplined. And it's because I went to all those events, right? I went to baby showers, I went to all the events with my family, but having it kind of be like, oh, I can't eat that, or, just bringing my own. I packed my own dinner for my cousin's wedding because I was like, she's not gonna have anything on the menu I can eat. So I literally had to bring my own like lunchbox I was insulated with my sweet potatoes, my whole grains, my greens, and I ate, along everybody else. But so I really had to do that. And because of my why is why I think I was able to keep it going. Because some people are like, oh, I'm gonna do that, but if your why isn't there, then it's really hard to stick with it when it gets tough.
Yeah. And so for example, as a postpartum doula, that's something that we work with moms that we work with in trying to nurse them back to health after having, a baby. We focus a lot on nutrition and trying to make sure that mom has everything that she needs to be able to support her, not only, physical well-being and mental well-being, but also being able, if she's breastfeeding, being able to have that milk production to support babies, feeding journey as well. So that's a lot. Like the mental physical intersectionality is something that we really focus on, especially in the postpartum period, as postpartum doulas.
Absolutely, yes. And I for my last client I had back in April, I had an amazing home birth, and a lot of times I just found myself feeding her, like literally physically feeding her because her hands were full. She's either nursing or she's trying to do something with the baby, and I'm like, your food is here, it's getting cold. Like you need this just as bad as the baby needs, the milk that you're producing. So I was just like, you want me to feed you? Like, okay, here we go. And so I mean, even right after birth of her home birth, like I remember feeding her like maybe that next morning, and then like a couple weeks later, just because her hands, you just need another hand, you need a couple extra hands, and that's what doulas do. We fill in. And so it didn't feel weird like feeding another grown woman because that's what was needed in the moment. We would laugh about it and stuff later, but in the moment that's what she needed. And that client I had was really great at being like proactive. I mean, she had prepped her meals ahead of time. She had things in the freezer. She had great ingredients like ginger and turmeric and, broths and things that were really nourishing to her. But like, what good is all that preparation if you can't actually get it in your body? So that's where I was just, that extra hand for her.
Right.
But yeah, it's so important.
Right. And after it's like, It's interesting, and I've heard this, we talk about this sometimes within the doula community, about when you're pregnant, the focus is on you because you have the baby and you want to make sure mom is healthy so that the baby's healthy. But once sometimes, and we're getting better about this, but once the baby is out, most of the focus goes towards the baby and not on mom. So to your example, like, no, like, you mom, you need to get some of this too. So like, here, I need to support you to be able to support baby. It's like a ecosystem, right? I support mom, mom supports baby, you know?
Absolutely. Yep, that's it.
So yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm learning more as a postpartum doula, like my role in supporting moms and in that capacity. And like I said, how that mental and physical health intersect. But yeah, I appreciate having you on today and talking about your journey with food and how you use food as your medicine to kind of transform where you were at that time with your physical health. So thank you so much for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I enjoy being here.
And thank you for joining Two Dope Black Doulas. I hope that you will tune into future episodes. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.